Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
And sustainability is complex. One decision may make sense for being more sustainable in one way versus maybe you make a different decision and it can be more sustainable in another. And so it's kind of up to the brand and the consumer to figure out what the best path is for each of those things. But it is nice to see that consumers are becoming more and more educated over time.
You're listening to the Good Dirt Podcast. This is a place where we dig into the nitty-gritty of sustainable living through food, fashion, and lifestyle.
And we're your hosts, Mary and Emma Kingsley, the mother and daughter founder team of Lady Farmer. We're sowing seeds of slow living through our community platform, events, and online marketplace.
We started this podcast as a means to share the wealth of information and quality conversations that we're having in our world as we dream up and deliver ways for each of us to live into the new paradigm, one that is regenerative, balanced, and whole.
We want to put the microphone in front of the voices that need to be heard the most right now, the farmers, the dreamers, the designers, and the doers.
So come cultivate a better world with us. We're so glad you're here. Now, let's dig in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Good Dirt Podcast. Can't believe it's the last Friday in September, getting into fall. And it also means that we have another episode of Slow Living Through the Seasons coming up next week, which is super exciting. And it feels like we just launched this podcast and we already have the third episode, which really sounds crazy, but that doesn't feel very slow to me. But it is. It's just once a month, Slow Living Through the Seasons. And what are we talking about next week, Mom, on that episode?
Yeah, as usual, we'll be taking a look at the month from the slow living perspective. We'll be taking a look at Halloween, its origins and its significance, and how we can experience what's special about this season without being swamped by all the commercial noise around it, and what's going on in the October garden, planting by the signs, of course, and a couple of shares from the seasonal kitchen.
So exciting. Can't wait to hear it. And also on that note, the Almanac is open for full enrollment. So if you are looking to join a community of Good Dirt podcast listeners and others interested in slow and sustainable living, the Almanac is very joinable. We had it closed to enrollment over the summer, but is now open. All the information for joining is on the website. There are 2 tiers. The lower tier is the Good Dirt supporter membership, which simply you get access to a forum specifically for the podcast and the podcast episodes. We can carry on the discussion there. You will have access to upcoming bonus content. We're working on getting some of that together. And then the Almanac, which is sort of a tier above, you have access to our quarterly book clubs, our monthly gatherings of members, our monthly Skillshare sessions. We get together as a community and someone from the community will share a skill or a passion that they have with others. And there's just a lot more sort of discussions going on there. There's also a recording archive of all workshops and past talks and gatherings that we've had on the Almanac, on the higher tier. So all this information is on the website, multiple ways to get involved with Lady Farmer and the community. And we truly could not do this without your support. So even if you think you might not utilize the platform, that monthly pledge of support really helps us keep the show going, which we want to continue to do as long as we can.
So yeah, we want to keep the good dirt going so we can talk about the good dirt, which we do a lot on here, obviously. And we also love to talk to individuals and companies who are out there doing their best to nurture and protect the planet so that our good dirt can thrive and do what it does, which is to feed and support all life. And so that brings us to today's episode, where we explore yet another way of protecting our good dirt, and that is to become more aware of the ingredients in the products you're using. In particular, your cleaning products, cleaning up your cleaning, so to speak, and understanding the impact of what you're using and what goes down the drain.
Today, we're talking to David Watkins. He's the co-founder and CEO of Dirty Labs, which is a cleaning innovations lab on a mission to create the future of cleaning. Dirty Labs was founded to create a sustainable, bio-based approach to cleaning that is rooted in science and aligned with nature, without using petrochemicals, harsh synthetics, potential carcinogens, irritants, toxins, or any endocrine disruptors. At Dirty Labs, they believe that there is a smarter way to clean without these chemicals.
David is an award-winning product designer and entrepreneur. He spent his career designing, developing, and manufacturing consumer products for Google, Jawbone, Skull Candy, and Encase. It was during this time that he witnessed the excessive amount of manufacturing waste being produced for consumer products.
As an avid climber and outdoor enthusiast, David brings his passion for nature and sustainability into his design process. In this conversation, we learn how he has created innovative solutions to reduce waste and environmental impact, and how Dirty Labs as a company is really making a change for the better.
So here's David Watkins of Dirty Labs.
Hi, I'm David Watkins. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Dirty Labs. We're a cleaning products innovations lab, and we're on a mission to effectively eliminate our reliance on petrochemicals in cleaning products.
Well, how did you get there?
Yeah, sure. Going way back to background, I'm Taiwanese with a little bit of Dutch sprinkled in there. And I grew up in a pretty international household. So I grew up between California, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. Was adopted within the family. The family is fairly complicated in that regard. But as far as career-wise, I've worked in consumer products for pretty much all of my career. I was, I'd say, quite attracted by design and product development and manufacturing and creating things. I think I arrived at this career path sort of unintentionally in the beginning. Originally, I was planning on being a lawyer, and there were a number of things that kind of took me away from that path. I think one was, like in school, I didn't want to bill hours for a living. And little did I know till later, you find out just exactly how much lawyers can bill for hours. And then I also really liked creating things. So I think for most of my adult life, I've really liked to cook. And so I think that just kind of demonstrated that making things was a passion of mine. And then kind of learned about product design and product development, kind of like found my way in there. So I spent most of my career in consumer products. So some of it was in like sporting, like in the golf industry, making like bags and head covers and that sort of thing, to the outdoor industry. So that continued to be bags and things like that. Consumer electronics is probably where I spent the most time. And so worked in the design and development of consumer electronics. And part of maybe what inspired my path to Dirty Labs was really that I had lived and worked in China for about 7 years. And I think when you start manufacturing things on a large scale, it's pretty rewarding to see people use the products that you're working on, which is a cool thing. But also when you look at that industry, you're creating products that effectively go to landfill. When you see the products you're working on being built at that scale, and every year you're kind of redesigning and trying to resell that product to the same people, you really see kind of like this life cycle of product. And it's not particularly pretty, especially when you make mistakes and, a product run gets scrapped or something like that. And you just wonder where it all goes, right? And so for me, one point sort of later on after living in China, I really wanted to continue to work on products like physical goods, but I also wanted to work on things that were better solutions to things that people actually needed versus trying to sell a new gadget or a toy or something, right, to use for a very short period of time versus like what we're doing today. We're trying to create products that are a better alternative to things that people just kind of need in their daily lives.
So cool. How was the Dirty Labs beginning and your role in that?
So I was introduced to my co-founder, Dr. Pete He, who's like this incredibly talented chemist, through a founder of a different company. I was mentoring over at a accelerator program in New York City at the time, and had spent some time getting to know the CEO and founder of another startup. He knew that I was looking to get into a business that was more sustainable. And also, I think from Pete's perspective, so my background's definitely not in the cleaning product space or the chemical space or anything like that. But Pete that's the world that he comes from. And he's worked on a number of different things, everything from he was the first chemist to bring a odor neutralizing, like a Febreze type product to market, He's worked on a number of different categories in household cleaning to personal care for like a brand like Tatcha, but he's worked for like Henkel, Dial Corporation, Unilever, so big chemical effectively. His role at those places was in research and development and also in heading up sustainability for some of these things. So he was the founding chairman of the Sustainability Consortium, which is a pretty big organization. And so he had a lot of background in sustainability. If you work in R&D and sustainability at some of these bigger chemical companies, I think oftentimes your ideas may get overlooked, in favor of, sort of protecting the bottom line, so to speak. And so I think that his path to Dirty Labs was somewhat similar in that he wasn't particularly satisfied with what he was doing, sort of with his day-to-day job. And so the two of us met, hit it off. We started talking about what we could work on. And I'd say we arrived at laundry detergent as the starting point for kind of a number of reasons. I'd say that laundry is certainly like the largest home cleaning category out there. And we started looking at the idea of like wastewater. And while I think that if you look at home cleaning products, yes, many brands are trying to tackle the single-use plastics problem. And I think that it's pretty clear that there's, certainly like better choices and materials that people can make and that sort of thing. But I think there's probably like less thought that goes into what goes down the drain with the actual product itself. You stick your clothes in a washing machine, you don't really add the water yourself. It kind of handles it, on its own. And whatever you're using to clean the clothes with kind of just runs down. It's kind of not visible to you.
See it. Yeah. You don't have to like you take the trash out. So you see the plastic that you're using, or you see the Swiffer things you're throwing away or whatever. But that's an interesting point. I haven't thought about it like that.
Yeah, it's kind of something that, you just don't really interact with very much, right? So whatever things that kind of run down the drain in the kitchen sink or the shower, you're not thinking about too much, or you kind of assume that maybe that water's getting treated somewhere and therefore it's all good. But that was a big piece of why we wanted to start that, like start from laundry detergent. Also, I think that because we put the science first and the innovation and performance, that it was a category that was fairly difficult to innovate in, right? There's many different like washing conditions for things. You're washing lots of different types of materials. And, we saw a lot of room for innovation in the category. And that's kind of why we started there. You have a lot of product samples. And, if I was working on speakers or headphones or something, a lot of friends would be like, oh, can you, get me a sample of this or that? And it's kind of fun, but I've actually enjoyed the cleaning space even more, because I actually really like creating a living space for myself, whether it's been like an apartment in New York or a house here in Portland. And it's been fun to be able to use the products I work on like every day, like whether that's the dishwashing detergent or, when I wash my clothes or what have you, but interacting with it and having it be something that my friends all use is a nice thing for sure.
And that they need to use. There's not really a way around washing our clothes. So we have to do it anyways. That's so fun.
So when it comes to companies and product makers that claim to be changing things for the better, their product is better, cleaner, more environmentally friendly, all those things, what's different about Dirty Labs?
I would start with sort of how we're made up as a company, right? And so we're a fairly small team. We're 11 people. 3 of us are chemists. And I think for a company at our stage and size, it's fairly unique to have any chemists on board a lot of times, let alone 3, and 3 really like high caliber chemists. And so I would say that that's probably maybe the biggest defining feature of the company is that, not only do we have very high product standards and how we formulate around things, but having that expertise in-house allows us to do things that would be very different than taking a manufacturer's formulation and then tweaking it a little bit. Right. So we're coming to market with a product that we've designed and been very intentional about formulating. And we don't own the factories that we produce product in, but we're very specific about the process, the conditions, the ingredients, and all of that. So that's a big one for us.
That's really interesting. Because when you introduce Dirty Labs on the website and in the literature, you're a cleaning innovations lab. You're not like a cleaning product company.
Yeah, or a cleaning products brand or something, right? Yeah. So while we absolutely create consumer products and we brand them, I think we put a lot of focus on the formulation aspect. And what's interesting about maybe the way we're set up as well is because, a lot of the team doesn't come from the cleaning products or chemical space. And so because of that, the way we think about how we, create new products, we have a lot of flexibility in terms of, how we design things, right? And so being able to formulate products that, taking a powder and a liquid formulation, making them work really, really well together is something that we thought of that, maybe doesn't really exist the same way amongst many other products in the space. And so we have the opportunity, depending on like what the product that we're making is, to be really flexible or sort of creative in terms of like what that form factor or, sort of what form that product takes. So maybe we'll use like dilutables, or maybe we'll use, a number of different things, or just highly concentrated products. But there's a pretty wide range of opportunities for us there.
What's interesting about what you're saying is I haven't thought about, when I think about the products that I use every day, especially in cleaning daily consumables in the house. Through this work and the podcast and working with brands and having a brand of my own, I understand that a lot of these things are big multinational corporations, and a lot of it is the same stuff, packaged different labels. And a lot of this game, I'm doing air quotes, of like selling, consumer products is branding and using buzzwords and all of that. And so there's like certain brands that I do gravitate more towards because they have like nicer looking labels or they use the right words. But I had never really thought about, until coming across you guys, the idea that there is like an actual team of people working on specifically on that product. And exactly your point, having chemists in-house, and you don't actually own the factories. You're not this huge multinational vertically integrated machine. You really are just sort of like product first, which is really exciting. So I'm really glad to know that. And that's kind of a more like layered idea.
I think with some of the larger chemical companies, like obviously they take advantage of scale, right? And they typically, maybe they own many parts, if not all of their supply chain, right? In terms of surfactant plants and all of that. And, that I think benefits the consumer in that, maybe they're able to keep costs down because of that. But also, I think it does inhibit innovation to some degree, because if you're trying to design something and it's widely outside of your supply chain, that you may be much less incentivized to go down that route. Whereas we do have that flexibility, which is nice. And I think that it's helped us a lot, especially because we tend to take a different approach in each of the sort of product categories that we work in.
So the idea of green products, green household products, cleaning products, personal care products, a whole lot of things that are trying to jump on the sustainability bandwagon and the green campaign, be healthier, be more environmentally friendly, until a lot of it becomes, what we've come to call greenwashing. People use the right words, buzzwords that people recognize, and they'll buy it based on that rather than like going a little deeper and finding out what that really means for that particular product. So what is it you guys are doing in the green space that's really different from other cleaning brands that claim to be more sustainable? Like, for instance, I have an example. The little pods have been such a thing for a while. Yeah. Don't use the big plastic jug. Use the little pods that you can just throw in and then they go away. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would say that there is a whole lot of greenwashing out there. Like, I think it's very much on people's minds. And as a whole, I would say that it's nice that it's top of mind for consumers these days. So I think the fact that the conditions are even right for greenwashing to work is maybe a step in the right direction. But I think that also it can be frustrating, right? When you see environmental or sort of sustainability claims made by certain brands, and that these things are kind of misleading, right? Or there's like quite a bit of an omission of certain parts of the truth there. As a brand we're not perfect. We tend to make the most sensible decisions we can in terms of formulation and packaging. It can be difficult to get your message out because I think many consumers are like, I've heard that before. And it's pretty hard to differentiate which product is greener. And sustainability is complex, right? So one decision may make sense for being more sustainable in one way versus maybe you make a different decision and it can be more sustainable in another. And so it's kind of up to the brand and the consumer to figure out what the best path is for each of those things. But it is nice to see that consumers are becoming more and more educated over time. I'll give you an example. I think one would be like laundry sheets. We don't particularly care for pods because of the polyvinyl alcohol, which is when it breaks down and dissolves in the water is effectively like micro or nanoplastics that you're kind of flushing down the drain. If you look at laundry sheets, the substrate that those sheets are formulated on or impregnated onto, it's effectively the same material as what's on a pot because it's dissolving as well. While it benefits from not having liquid, right? Because it's a dry sheet and you can package it in a cardboard box and claim that there's no single-use plastics, in the packaging. The product itself actually contains microplastics. And so those kind of things get a little misleading and a little frustrating, right? Because I think people are like, hey, I'm not shipping around heavy bottles of liquid around. I'm making a more environmentally friendly choice. But in effect, you're just dissolving microplastics down the drain, which is, I'm sure, not many consumers' intent. But many are just not informed as to what the substrate is for that, detergent choice.
Yeah, and you all have done such a great job with your packaging. I love the product, but I was really impressed. When they came, it's like, wow, it really is plastic free. The only thing even resembling plastic is the little silicone dispenser that, you can use over and over and over again. And so I would love to hear about some of the challenges in that, because I know I've talked to a lot of companies there are a lot of products that I would probably like to use, or I believe the product is good. I don't choose them because of the packaging. And I've been known to make phone calls and talk to companies and talk to representatives and say, I would buy your product, but I just really don't like that this comes in a throwaway plastic thing. And lots of times you'll get the response, oh, well, we're working on that. That's a goal by 2030 or whatever. And you go, okay, that's good. At least they're even thinking about it, but you've done it. And I want to hear about some of the challenges of that. And I'm sure that's just not an easy path, but you're determined to do it and you've done it.
I think for us, it kind of goes back to the original formulation of the laundry detergent. Because when we launched the brand, we had a free and clear formulation of our laundry detergent, as well as the signature scented one. When my co-founder, when Pete and I were talking about the original formulation, I think one of the challenges that we were thinking about was the idea of perceived value. Because you can go to the grocery store and buy a humongous jug of laundry detergent and it seems like a great value. Whereas for our product, we believed in this idea of getting it as concentrated as possible to make shipping more efficient and all of that. And certainly the packaging requirements for it more efficient. So we have the equivalent of something that's about a 11x concentrated laundry detergent versus I think the average laundry detergent on shelf, the industry term for it would be where they're a 2x, concentrated laundry detergent. If you look back at laundry detergent innovations, there's been some stuff that's come along in terms of formulations and that sort of thing, but it took many, many years to get from sort of original laundry detergent to this 2x form. And so we've taken that to an 11x. One of the reasons why we arrived at that place was, number one, it was, something where it doesn't get too ridiculous to where you can't measure it out accurately, but also that it was concentrated enough to be able to give us some options in terms of how we packaged it. And so when we first launched the product, we had 75 load bottles that would be quite a bit smaller than a typical wine bottle, and it would hold 75 loads. And if you compared that to sort of the conventional alternative, that would be quite a large jug of laundry detergent. But that allowed us to use aluminum as the form factor for the bottle. And we like aluminum because it's infinitely recyclable. And I like the shelf appeal of it, or the feel in hand. And maybe it comes from also living in smaller apartments in New York City where space matters, right? And so having a concentrated product is a benefit. But that was kind of the start for how we ended up with sort of a bottle for laundry detergent, why we picked aluminum. And in the beginning, we also understood that it would be important to teach the consumer, teach the customer how much to use. And I think typically, maybe if you were the person in the household that purchased the product, you might understand that, okay, I'm paying for 75 loads of laundry detergent. I need to use the appropriate amount. But maybe you're somebody else in the household that just sees it and, they're going to have to understand how much to use. And so we actually had a plastic cap and spout in the beginning on that bottle to it was like a miniaturized typical laundry cap for this thing. And while, we were reducing single-use plastics on the bottle by a really significant amount, that was something that we didn't get right or get perfect off the bat. And that's how we kind of ended up with coming up with the reusable silicone beaker as the dosing device, because we still needed something to teach somebody how much to use. But, eliminating the single-use plastics was something that was important to us. And it didn't happen right away, right? Like it took us probably 9 or 10 months after launching, those first products to switch over into a different form factor.
So speaking of that, talk to us a little bit about silicone and why that's a better choice.
For us, one of the reasons why we like silicone, well, number one, it's very durable as a product. I would say that it doesn't leave the same, we don't have the same microplastics issue that we have with other sort of injectable or compression molded plastics. And there are challenges with it, of course, in that it's not very easily recyclable, but it's not exactly as damaging to the environment as some of these other plastics are.
And it's pretty infinitely reusable.
It is.
Is it my understanding that it doesn't break down like a little plastic measuring cup might be? It's going to get chipped and...
Yeah, I think durability is really high. There's actually some interesting uses for it too. So typically what we're trying to do is get a consumer like 1, maybe 2 silicone beakers, depending on how they're using them, right? But then moving them into the refill form factor, so they're not accumulating a whole bunch of these things. But for customers that do have extras, silicone actually, like the beakers actually work pretty well as a static reducer in the dryer. So if you have some extras, you can kind of leave them in your dryer and it'll reduce static in there as well.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't realize that. You can order your next batch and not get the beaker.
So if you switch to our 80 load bottle, it does not come with one.
And before we get too far off of what you just said with the concentration, you said consumers need to be educated. I'm like realizing that I never even thought about, like, I guess I noticed that it was a smaller bottle and a smaller beaker and I followed the line. So of course I was putting less in. But it wasn't until you said that I realized, oh yeah, just because something looks like it's a big bottle with like a big cup and you're pouring like a whole cup of detergent in it, I'm not thinking of, and I consider myself a pretty informed consumer, I'm not thinking about the concentration of something. I'm just kind of blindly following directions and I like the way it smells and I know it's better for the environment. So I'm not questioning it, but it's interesting to point out, I'm going to think about that in general now for a lot of other things. Kind of like how they've across the board been making like they've been making boxes smaller, but keeping the price the same kind of thing, what are you getting for the price kind of concentration? So
yeah, there's lots of tricks there, right?
Yeah.
So, I think early on, as we were kind of designing the product, I had talked to somebody who was a product manager at one of the big chemical companies. I won't name which one, but if you can imagine, as this product manager, one of his things that he did was he increased the size of the cap on the laundry detergent bottle. I think they took the size of the cap up by 15% or something like that. And while the recommended dose line for, whatever, let's say a medium wash load remained the same, but the cap got bigger. And so consumers just started using more laundry detergent. And so it took gross margins up or gross profits up by 5% or something by doing so. And so for us, we're trying to actually convince consumers that they can use less.
You said perceived value. So you need to show that your product is more valuable and worth more. It's fascinating.
Also, I'd like to point out that those big plastic jugs are mostly water.
Right, because they're less concentrated.
Yeah. So people, we're talking about perceived value and they go, oh, look, I get this big thing for this great price, or I could get this little box of powder or whatever. So it's really important that people understand that you're buying a big old plastic thing that's, going to end up in the landfill forever.
And the cap is now bigger. This is literally designed to make you use more, so you buy more.
You buy more. So that's just important for consumers to understand.
Yeah, there's lots of things that we do, right? So I think designing the product to be very effective at the measurements we're recommending is one piece of that. We tend to provide multiple benefits as well. And so if you've got a detergent that is very effective at, removing stains and cleaning clothes, but also is gentler on your clothes at the same time, that maybe you're providing some additional value and, extending the life of those clothes. And because we work very well in cold water, maybe there's some energy savings that you're able to take advantage of as well. We have some natural fabric softening characteristics built into the formula based on the way the enzymes work in there. We tend to kind of recommend that people don't use fabric softeners but you're kind of getting some of the benefits of maybe what a fabric softener would provide as part of the formula as well. And so you're providing a number of different benefits to kind of add up to a full package.
Right. And you bring up a good point about like consumer priority. For example, the more people are choosing maybe natural fibers over, polyesters and synthetics, and the more they're going to prioritize, laundry detergents that are more gentle on the fabrics. And so that these nicer clothing items or clothing items that are intended to last longer can last longer and not be like, just degenerated through harsh chemicals. I think that's a gradual shift in consumer goals that is beginning to catch on a little more.
What is Dirty Lab's greatest challenge in communicating perceived value to the consumer? And how kind of has that job for you changed as consumer behavior has shifted recently towards more sustainable products? But what is still something that's a challenge for you?
I would say that there's definitely more mass consciousness around climate change and a desire to make more intentional decisions for consumers to do their part, right, with their buying decisions. You can see it today where people are looking to reduce plastic consumption in their lives and that sort of thing. For us, maybe the biggest challenge is trying to cut through the noise of like the greenwashing you mentioned. And so we kind of have to pick our messages. And so I think for us, it's like solving a problem for people, right? So not only is it being a sustainable choice, because you can probably design something that is pretty sustainable as a cleaning solution pretty easily. But then if you want it to be clean and also very effective, then that's where the challenge lies, right? And so for us, like leading with the performance, that's where we feel like we're able to differentiate. So we kind of lead with performance because I think that's what will keep people coming back to us. We are taking advantage of, our investment into the chemistry and the science and starting there.
So when was Dirty Labs founded? How many years has it been in existence?
We've been available to the public since the beginning of 2021, and we piloted it at the end of 2020. So we've been around for a little over 3 years now. Pete and I have been working on it a little bit, prior to that, of course.
Is that enough time to get a glimpse of any kind of meaningful growth in people's interest in this kind of thing? Or are you still in the beginning stages of determining who your audience is and what they want?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been really encouraging since the start. Like, I think that we've seen consistent growth year over year now, sevenfold from the first year to the second year. End of this year, we'll probably have replaced about 30 million loads of petrochemical laundry detergent. So it's nice to see some scale that gets applied to what you're working on.
So for the many of us that aren't chemists, what is it that you're replacing in, say, typical laundry detergent that takes you away from petrochemicals?
Yes. I would say, I guess to describe how a typical laundry detergent works, they are typically surfactant-driven cleaners. And so those surfactants have an oil component to them. And so typically with like maybe many of the conventional brands, that oil source comes from petrochemicals. And if you look at some other products that have been released out in market, it is possible to replace the oil source with a plant-based source of oil to create those surfactants. From what we found, though, is that the end molecule, the end result, is very similar, regardless of where the oil component of a surfactant molecule comes from. And so some of the byproducts can be similar, right? And so having something that's synthetic surfactant driven almost by design, you're getting some nasty sort of byproduct chemicals as a result of building product that way. Whereas Dirty Labs' formulations were really enzyme driven for our detergents. What we found is that like enzymes in laundry detergents it's not a new thing, right? Like typically in a premium laundry detergent, you'll have some enzymes in there as a performance additive or performance booster. But by kind of changing the focus of how we formulate the detergent and using sugar-based surfactants to go along with that, we're getting effectively much friendlier ingredients to play together much nicer and get to that performance, right? Where we're, meeting or exceeding the conventional alternative in terms of performance. But because it's all bio-based materials, the way we kind of clean products is more how nature would clean something. And that also means that, those those chemicals or the detergent breaks down after it's been used and readily biodegrades afterwards.
That's fascinating.
Yes. So are there other ingredients that you have taken out that you would normally find in a conventional laundry detergent that you're confident make your product more environmentally friendly?
As a whole, there's quite a few. I think that number one, we're California Prop 65 chemical of concern free, which is pretty unusual for the laundry space.
Explain that a little bit.
So we don't use any chemicals that are on the California Prop 65 chemical of concern list, which is a list of chemicals that's been identified by the state of California that has detrimental effects either on human safety or the environment. And so we steer clear of those things. I'd say that, the other thing that we are free of is we're free of EU listed fragrance allergens as well, which is another list. But, we have a fairly limited palette of things that we can work with. I think the chemists here at Dirty Labs are very creative in terms of how they use the ingredients that we do. And that's kind of how we achieve the performance characteristics of our products.
Do you guys have a physical lab?
Yeah, doing beakers. Yeah, we actually have two labs. We have one in Montana and one in Arizona.
Very cool.
And I heard you mention you've avoided the fragrances that are on the EU list. These fragrances that are typically allowed in the United States. I think that's interesting. Did I get that right?
Right. And so, yeah, exactly. And so I think that the simplest approach that many companies take is that, hey, fragrances are bad. Maybe you should avoid them, which is, why we have a free and clear product. I think that there's some people that just prefer no fragrance at all because they view it as unnecessary. In the laundry space, I think people do associate clean with a scent, right? Like, they smell something, whether that's, they grew up with Tide or whatever, and they associate that smell with being clean. And so for us, we had a choice when it came to scent, right? And so I think a lot of companies have taken the approach of, okay, instead of using synthetic fragrances, we're going to use only essential oils to be that scent. But, I think in concentrated products and, in cleaning products in general, essential oils can contain quite a few allergens, right? Because you can imagine you're taking sort of concentrated plant matter or something, and that can contain a pretty high percentage of fragrance allergens. And so for us, while we are mostly natural, we do use some very safe synthetics in our scents, but with the purpose of it being that, we can be much safer in terms of like not being a source of allergens.
Yeah. I just think it's super interesting for the consumer to know that there are a lot of things that are not used in other countries that are banned or against the law.
And I think that's kind of the thing with the California Prop 65 is like California is like the only state so far to even generate a list.
Yeah. And it's starting to change. You're starting to see some shifts, right? So in New York, for example, so 1,4-dioxane is the byproduct of a number of surfactants, and it shows up in cleaning products. It also shows up in personal care things, like even in shampoos, body washes, and that sort of thing. It's a forever chemical, and it's showing up in the groundwater in Long Island. New York has started to regulate that. And so you're starting to see certain products being banned on shelves. So when I go into a store in New York City, some of the products that used to be there are no longer.
Interesting.
Is California the only state that has their list of banned ingredients?
No, but I think it's probably the most robust list. And not all of them are banned per se.
Yeah.
It's just that if you're using them, you then have to label that and inform the customer.
You put it a watch list, I think is the term you use. This is also interesting. Yeah. So how would you say that your journey with Dirty Labs has changed you?
Yeah, I think that the problems that we solve for at the company also makes me examine choices in my life as well. I think that I've been fairly intentional as a consumer to, maybe this comes as a result of like city life, right? Where you don't have a lot of space, but I'm pretty conscious of the products that I'll purchase and bring into my space just because space is fairly limited. But I'm certainly more conscious of what I choose to purchase and use and how I choose to like repurpose things and that sort of thing after my journey with Dirty Labs. It's been interesting kind of living here in Portland, Oregon, where, you've got 4 different trash bins, right? So you can see like the waste that you're creating. And I'm certainly not, you hear stories of people that, are so good about managing their waste that they fit like a year's worth of waste into like a mason jar or something. And so I'm not that extreme as a consumer, but I'm very conscious of it. And so like the trash cans that I take out every day or like every week, sorry, tends to be recycling first and foremost. And then compost is another one. And then the trash itself maybe goes out once every 2 to 4 weeks or something, just being able to manage that. And so it's nice being in a place where, composting is a thing, because that's certainly a big part of maybe what fills up most trash cans or most households. But because I'm thinking about packaging all the time and all of that, certainly that affects my daily life, whether it's like, oh, maybe I don't need that plastic bag at the grocery store or something.
And maybe this goes beyond your work with Dirty Labs, but in general, your work in consumer products, like how has that changed you as a consumer?
I think I put a lot of value in, like, I'll spend that little bit more money to purchase something that lasts. Fashion, for example, is an industry that's gotten a lot of flack for being very disposable. The laundry example for that would be that, one of the best ways to reduce the carbon footprint of a garment is effectively to just make it last longer, right? Or get more utility out of it. And so I think I'm probably more conscientious of, what I choose to purchase. And then I'm pretty selective in terms of figuring out which option is best for me.
Yeah, you probably know a lot more than you could even explain, just like being in it. So at Lady Farmer and on the Good Dirt, we talk a lot about slow living, which leads into slow fashion and slow food. And that's our approach to sustainability, is just slowing down in general. So what does slow living mean to you?
For me, slow living probably means living in the moment more than anything, right? Being present, that applies to maybe self-care. And as a startup founder, sometimes that's tough. Maybe one of the things that's redeeming about it for sure is that I do love what I do for work, right? And so, if work is going to be a big part of living, then at least making that enjoyable and feel meaningful, that's important to me. But as far as slowing that down, I think it's taking time for the people that I care about in my life and really kind of nurturing the relationships with the important people there as well.
That's awesome. And do you feel like you're able to enjoy slow living, even though you're a busy startup founder?
Yeah, I think so. I think I do a pretty good job of that. I may not sleep very much, but I make time for it for sure.
Okay, so, we are the Good Dirt podcast, and we talk a lot about good dirt on here. So we always like to ask our guests, what does good dirt mean to you?
I'd say metaphorically, it evokes having and maintaining the conditions to thrive and grow. Speaking to, the products that we make and that sort of thing, the quality of soil and dirt and all of that is all connected to wastewater and things that we're trying to manage and mitigate with our products. So that's meaningful. I like to cook quite a bit, as I mentioned. And so, having great produce that's grown in good dirt is something I see as a value for sure. I'm one of those people that takes a lot of interest in heirloom varieties of peppers or different things that, are new and exciting to try. And certainly people taking the care to work with that dirt is of value to me. And I appreciate those things.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to leave with the audience about the work that you're doing, about Dirty Labs as a company?
I think that maybe one of the things that you mentioned is that, your purchasing decisions certainly support brands like ours. We think that we're making a lot of decisions to be safer for our customers and better and easier on the planet. And then, certainly depending on, what the product is, if it's laundry detergent, we're very intentional about making those products be efficient and make your clothing last longer. And there's a number of things that we may have not talked about in terms of cleaning performance and, making synthetics last longer as well as natural fibers. But as a company, there's things that we do well. I think that we've set the bar pretty high, but also at the same time, there's plenty that we recognize that we can do better. We'd love to hear any comments from, maybe your listeners that have tried the product or are interested in trying the product. We're here for outreach and feedback anytime.
Very cool. It's always nice to know that it's a small team of real people and hear the actual voice of it. So that's really nice to know. I'm always shocked when I get any sort of customer relations, email response or something from a human with a name and I see the name on the website. That's very meaningful. So
yeah, I love having the behind the scenes familiarity with the people. So it was really, really nice meeting you today and chatting with you about Dirty Labs.
Yeah, if people have questions for our team, I think if it's a complex question, you may get a response directly from one of our chemists. We encourage our customers to reach out, or, people who are interested in trying it to ask questions.
Very cool.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for joining us today, David. It was a pleasure meeting you and a pleasure talking to you. And this is not even staged, but I have to go do laundry after this because Mom and I are going on a trip tomorrow. I need to do alone. I'm going to be using Dirty Labs. Love the bergamot scent one.
Perfect. Really lovely to meet you guys, and thank you.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in, calling in, and spreading the good dirt. We love hearing from you. You can reach our listener voicemail at 443-459-1950. That's 443-459-1950. You can find this number in our show notes and in our Instagram profile.
This show is produced by Lady Farmer, a slow living lifestyle community, and the original music is composed and performed by John Kingsley.
For more from Lady Farmer, follow us on Instagram at WeAreLadyFarmer. That's We Are Lady Farmer. Or join us online at www.ladyfarmer.com. We'll see you next time on The Good Dirt.
Goodbye.